So I thought, since The Apocalypse Box, that was my last movie, came out last year, it's been out for a while now, it's on Tubi and Amazon, I urge you to give it a watch. So I thought I'd give you some of the valuable lessons I learned from making the film, so hopefully you can apply them if you're about to make a feature. The first thing I'd say when you're thinking of making a feature film is to set the dates for the shoot. So obviously you've got to worry about money, and for this one I knew we were self-financing this film, so I knew all I had to do was make sure I had enough money in the bank to cover the shoot. Now once I knew that, myself and Laura sat down and we looked at dates in the calendar, we picked those dates and we said, right, hell or high water, those are the ones we're going for. And setting those dates, if you're going to make a feature film, what that really does is it forces you to make things happen. It does sometimes force you to make sacrifices, but some sacrifices are necessary to get the film finished. We shot the film in a couple of blocks. We did a 3-day shoot just to get some of the stuff before the room out of the way, and then we did a long 2-week shoot, and the majority of that was in the room, and then some bits and bobs later in the year to fill in some other scenes around the main shoot. I think because I was working with such a big crew and such a big cast for the first time, in the past I've made films where I've had a big crew and a small cast. I've never worked with a big crew and a big cast, so lots of actors, lots of people moving around in front of the camera, as well as lots of crew behind the scenes making things happen. So that was a little intimidating to me, and I think perhaps the first mistake I made was on the first day, in that I was adamant I wanted to get a wide shot coverage of everything, but I think secretly, subconsciously, what I actually wanted to do was block maybe the first 20 minutes of the film. So it did prove useful in the end, because it meant that all the actors knew where they were supposed to be. Ideally, what I'd have done is done maybe a week's worth of rehearsals and got all of that stuff nailed. We didn't have that time, so unfortunately that had to happen on the first day of the shoot, and we did shoot a wide shot of the first like 10 to 15 minutes of the movie within that room. And yeah, it put me back a little bit because it meant we were on catch up after that. But if I hadn't done that, I don't think myself or anyone else would have known exactly where everyone was supposed to be, and also figuring out that line, the 180-degree line when people are talking to each other, became much easier because everybody had an understanding of where they were supposed to be. We'd blocked it out. If I was to do the film again with that larger cast, I would insist on rehearsals. I'd absolutely have to, because I think that would save a lot of blocking and a lot of pain and a lot of time when we actually come to shoot the movie. The other thing I was concerned about, and I had lots of chats with Andre about this, was if we had that many characters in one location, how are we going to light all of those people without having a ton of lighting in there and overlighting the space, or also having tons of different lighting setups to make sure everyone's lit. So very early on we had a discussion about it, and we decided that there'd be 2 main light sources in that room. One would be the projector and the other would be the bounce off the screen. Now what this allowed Andre to do was also always keep in mind where that light was coming from, and this is a great tip if you're working on your first feature film, is very early on he was always thinking about where light was coming from, because it might be a temptation to stick a light anywhere, light your character up. When you come to edit the movie, it'll be super noticeable if where the lighting's coming from is shifted, especially when you do your grade. So we'd had this discussion early on, having one light source this side, one light source this side, and we knew we just had to stick to that rule with where the lighting comes from. But also it helped us with the shots, because Andre was really keen on getting that nice contrast with the faces, getting a dark side and a light side, and it meant the blocking became easier because we knew where those light sources were coming from. I'd say one regret of the shoot, this isn't a regret actually because I wouldn't have been able to do it anyway, but one of the things myself and Laura did miss out on was those trips to the pub after the shoot. So we pretty much stuck to a sort of 7 to 8 hour shooting day, and it was in the daytime, so everyone went home of an evening, or they went to Witherspoons or the local pub and hung out and socialised. Myself and Laura came home, went through the next day's shoot, went through the storyboards, got everything sorted and ready for the next day. So I guess If there's any lesson from that, it is one that when you're a director and a producer, you can't really have that best friend relationship with your cast and crew. You can't be overly buddy-buddy because you won't get that opportunity unless you've got more money and you've got a much longer shooting period. You know, you're able to build in that time. One thing I'm religious about is storyboards. My storyboards are terrible. They are the worst storyboards you'll ever see. They're stick men. They maybe don't even make sense to somebody who doesn't understand how I draw, but what they do is they kind of keep the train on the tracks for me. So what I tend to do is I'll storyboard the whole film before the shoot, and then each night before we go in to shoot that sequence, I'll go back through those storyboards, re-familiarise myself with what needs to be shot, order those shots, so I don't necessarily work from a specific shot list that everybody's got. This is all coming from me because I like to be able to work on the fly, and I like to be able to change things if I need to. You know, I'm going to be cutting the film, so all of the films I've solo directed, I've edited, which means I'm kind of doing a bit of that editing in my head, and I can only do that if I've got my storyboard book and I can see where the cuts are going to be and see the shots that I don't really need. And I think one thing I've noticed from this film to my very first film is in the beginning I would do so much coverage. I would do traditional, I'd do wide shots, medium shots, close-ups. Then once I got all of that, if I had time, I'd then be able to think creatively, oh, how could I, what else could I add into this to make it more interesting? Well, you should sort of reverse that and think about, how do I make this whole film interesting? How is it gonna tell the story? How are these shots gonna tell the story? Not worry about coverage. If you're really desperate for coverage, you can do a wide shot, but like I said earlier, I hardly ever use that wide shot because it was dull, it was kind of not very interesting, and it sort of made you feel like you were watching a theatre play. Whereas I like to get right close up in on my characters, and I like the lot of movement and those shots to tell the story. So I can put a schedule together, and so can you, but I would say one of my tips here would be make sure you have somebody with an analytical brain, and I've got Laura, who can then go through that schedule and make sure I'm not missing anything out or missing any opportunities to shoot in the same location or with the same people, because obviously if you send an actor home and they need to get them back a week later, it's going to cost you money on expenses, on accommodation, on food. So you've got to try and maximise the time that you spend with the actor or spend in that location, and your schedule is your opportunity to do that. So we scheduled the film as early as we possibly could, because another reason is you want to book your accommodation and your travel very early because it'll be much cheaper. So again, that schedule is going to save you money when you're booking things, but it's also going to save you money on set because you're not having to get people back many times, you're not having to go back to the same location, and you're not wasting time and money. I was lucky enough on the Apocalypse box to have 3 students who were doing assembly edits for me every night. They were coming onto set, taking away the rushes and putting those assembly edits together overnight so that I could then watch them in the morning and make sure I had everything I needed and didn't need to go back in and catch any pickups or any extra shots, because I knew that'd be very difficult to assemble everyone again. And you know, this is another way of saving time and money, because not only am I editing in my storyboards, I'm getting somebody to do me an edit, even if it's not quite the edit that ends up being the one I do. I just know I've covered everything. I've got everything. I've got enough to make that film. So if you can get somebody to do an assembly edit, that's fantastic. The other advantage of that is someone else has got a copy of the film. So if anything happens to your hard drives, anything happens to those memory cards, there is another place you can go to get that footage if you need it. If at all possible, what I like to do is try to get an entire scene shot before lunch, so that after lunch you're going fresh into a new scene. I think this is just maybe like a psychological barrier that it's good to punch through. Even if it means lunch is slightly later, what it just means is that you feel a sense of accomplishment from the morning, and then going into the afternoon, you're not finishing stuff up, you're not trying to pick up stuff from earlier. You've completed one entire thing and you're moving on to the next. So after we'd done the main shoot, we had a few bits and bobs to do to finish off the story, close it out. I did some audio sessions with some of the cast. to get the sounds that the box would make in their voices, the kind of creepy whispers, as well as any dialogue and audio that we hadn't managed to capture on the day. We even recorded some fresh dialogue to kind of make certain things make sense. So the film was constantly evolving in the edit. I'd say the editing process took maybe 6 months of me, non-stop putting that each evening, putting the film together, tweaking it, handing it over for sound, handing over effects. So Alex, who's one of the lecturers at the uni, he was doing the computer effects with a bunch of students, so they were all working on that. I had Chris Trim at the uni doing the colour grade, so he was doing that while I was doing the edit, so I'd give him the film in blocks. That's another thing I'd say is a really good way of looking at post-production if you are on a micro budget, is separating the film out. If it's an hour and a half, maybe separate it out into like 9 chunks that you can then, once you've got those chunks done, lock them off, save them on separate hard drives, back them up, but then you've locked that part of the film, and then you're able to lock those parts together to watch the film as a whole. When we got to the sales and distribution process for the film, we've been through the mill with sales and distribution. We've had highs and lows, and I think some of those have been because of just the way the film industry's changed and the amounts of money people are offering for films. And also we've been screwed over in the past, we've been conned, we've been overpromised on how much a film would make. We'd been fleeced with marketing and sales fees, and I think we were fed up and tired of that. So we wanted to change things completely on this one. We didn't want to rely on a traditional sales agent. So we went with Indie Rights, which is kind of self-distribution in a way, but they are your sales agent. So effectively, they'll get the film out there, they'll put it up on platforms, they'll keep 20%, there's no marketing fees, and you get the rest, and you get regular communication from them. So we've done our research, I've spoken to people who were with them and couldn't sing praises highly enough for them, and they're very honest about what you need to do to get people to get eyes on your film. So there's been a really interesting learning curve for us to work with that type of sales agent, and I think because they've been so open with the information they give the filmmakers, you can't help but learn things that normally a sales agent would keep to themselves. But I think what I've been really pleased with Indie Rights about is the communication. So any sales agents out there listening, communication is almost the most important part of that relationship, is knowing as a filmmaker, if you send an email, you'll get a response straight away with an honest answer. And I'd say they've been really good at that. I've learned a lot from them about streaming and about promotion. And promotion for this one's been very different for us again. In the past, when we've had a traditional sales agent distributor relationship, we've essentially handed the film over and the film's just come out, and we haven't even been informed what day the film's coming out. We'll just suddenly see it pop up on a streaming service, or it will pop up in a shop. Back in the days of DVD, we wouldn't really get much notice on when it was coming out and be able to do any promotion. This time with Indie Rights, and it's something they really tell you about when you go to release your film, that the promotion for the film is on you. So it's up to you to build that audience, and it's up to you to promote the film and get people to watch it, which again, that's a new situation for us, but that's been a massive learning curve. So if I could go back and do that process again, I think I'd really think about my target audience, and I'd think about how to reach them. And I'd probably rely a lot less on my existing network, because I think there is this assumption that friends and family, everyone you know, are all going to run out and watch this film and buy it. But that's not enough. That is just the tip of the iceberg for the people that you want to get to your film and reach your film. I'd have also probably started the promotion a lot earlier. I'd have started promoting probably during the shoot, doing a lot more social media stuff during the shoot, and that is hard. You almost need somebody to take that as a responsibility, because you can't really concentrate on that while you're making a film, but at the same time you want to take your audience on that journey, especially fans of a genre. You want them to be aware of the struggles, the highs, the lows, and get behind you as a filmmaker, as well as the actual project itself. So the film's out there now. It's on a ton of different streaming services. You can even watch it for free on YouTube or on Tubi right now. So do watch the film, tell me what you think. Let me know in the comments below if you kind of connect any of the things I've said to the actual film that you watch, the finished complete film. I think every film I make is a learning process and teaches me so much, and this one was a real lesson in working with a bigger crew, working with a lot more actors, letting other people take control of things, because I think as filmmakers sometimes we're a bit too selfish with stuff and a bit too we hold on too tightly to everything, when you really should trust the people who are experts in their own field. So for example, Andre, trust the DOP, knows exactly what he's doing, and I think what prepares you for that is time and knowledge. So if you know a little bit about that role, then you know that he knows what he's doing and you've picked the right person. And especially with cast, knowing and trusting that your cast know their characters inside out, so you don't have to worry about that. As long as you've picked the right people for those parts, casting's critical, that'll make your shoot so much easier. I hope you'll go and watch the film. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you on the next one.